Comic-Con, Mirage, movie Turtles, IDW, Archie stuff, cartoon figures.
Wow. I was not expecting that. What's happening, everybody, and welcome to Speekygeeky. I, as always, am your host, Mr. Geek-E. I'm very excited because our guest on today's show is brand manager on a series near and dear to my heart, and if you're watching this, we're guessing one of your favorites as well. Please welcome to the show, NECA's TMNT brand manager, Trevor Zammit. Welcome, Trevor.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. I guess what I want to start by saying here is we're thrilled to have you. And with all the recent teases lately on a whole lot of the TMNT fronts, we'll have a lot of ground to cover. But before we dive in, first I want to give you an opportunity to tell any of the handful of remaining folks out there who somehow haven't heard about NECA and the awesome products you're putting out over there, a little bit more about what you do, where folks can find you, and your journey of how you got to NECA.
Yeah, if you don't know, NECA is a company. We make action figures. It's more like the higher end, like adult collector toys. Like we're just big kids. We're making toys basically for ourselves. Like we just want to make the stuff that we didn't have in the 80s or the 90s growing up. NECA has pretty active like online social media presence. So you can pretty much just like talk to us directly. We answer back like, questions on Instagram and Twitter. We're on Facebook, all the big platforms. NECA's on all of those. My boss, Randy Falk, he's been there for over 20 years, I think, making toys. I think their first line that they made was like Hellraiser figures, but they made just tons and tons of, every year they had like the cooler stuff at their booth. I'd go to Comic-Con or I'd go to Toy Fair. I was trying to be like a toy designer coming out of art school and stuff from Ohio. And NECA always caught my eye. Like they were making really cool like Pirates of the Caribbean figures, just like cool pirate toys. And then that one year they had like Eastman and Laird Ninja Turtles, and it just like blew my mind. So I had to work there. I'd never seen anything that cool. I was like such a diehard Turtle fan. Like the Four Horsemen sculpted those, and those guys are incredible. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the coolest stuff ever. So yeah, eventually probably, I think it was around like 2010, I guess, like Randy hired me. So I've been working there pretty much ever since. I took a little break to go to another company and it was not fun. So I came back. And then when I came back, that was when I took on the brand manager role for Turtles. Like Randy, we used to, they made the Eastman and Laird Turtles, and then those went away for a little while. Like they had shown the Foot Clan one year at Comic-Con, and then they never got released. Time had passed, and then I guess Nickelodeon took over the license, and then we were in talks with them about making like arcade, like video game Turtles and cartoon figures, and that's when the Turtle thing kind of like had a second coming or something, right? And so I was involved in that stuff, like the arcade Turtles and the cartoon Turtles. And then once we got out, we were kind of confined to just selling figures at Comic-Con. They could only be like a 4-pack or a big like exclusive. And then once we got out of that and we could sell them at Target, Randy had just big plans to like go crazy with the cartoon line. And I think at that point we had started making the movie figures. So we had done the big quarter scale movie Turtles, and then we had shrunk those down, and all of a sudden it just got bigger and bigger. And Randy was like, come back and be brand manager and you can just make Turtles all day. How could I pass that up?
Heck yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
It was just too good to be true.
Were Turtles always your favorite? Yeah, everyone's got their favorite thing they grew up with.
Kind of. It was a big one. Like when I was really little, I was into He-Man. I loved the Ghostbusters. I loved Thundercats. All the 80s toys were great. All that stuff was awesome. And then, just at the end of the 80s and getting into the 90s, Turtles was just this cool, weird new thing. And then that first movie came out, and it was just like, that movie was so good. Before that, there weren't really a lot of good sort of like, your favorite cartoon. Like the He-Man movie, it was weird. I didn't like the He-Man movie, and I don't know, there's something about Turtles that just like really caught my attention. I was just hooked. Yeah. So it's been a lifelong obsession for sure.
So is that your favorite of the films, the very first one?
Oh, definitely the first one. Yeah, it was just, there's something like, it's a little darker, a little grittier than the second one. They kind of like softened the edges, and it was a little more campy and cartoony and stuff. That first one, I just never seen anything. I was about 9 or 10, I think. I saw it. My dad took me to the theater to see it, and I was just like, like blown away. It was, you know, they're like Raph gets like the crap beat out of him, you know, all that stuff. I didn't know the comic book, so like so much of that, you know, was taken directly from like the comics. It was just so cool, and like those Henson suits were just, they look so real, you know, that I just like, yeah, it was that movie was really special. And then they got a little goofier and a little goofier, and then,
well, I mean, I think part two, you could absolutely feel the influence of the cartoon series in that, you know,
yeah,
where you could see that was
and the influence of like the parents that are like, it's too violent. It totally
right.
seemed like what, you know, your mom starts like meddling with like, you know, like these kids, you know, because it's like me and my friends were all trying to do backflips and we're kicking each other, and like, you know, we just wanted to copy everything we see in the movies and stuff. So yeah, you're like running around with like, so I was trying to make my own size out of like coat hangers and whatever, like just making nunchucks out of sticks. I could see where parents were a little concerned that like all the, you know, and kids trying to crawl into the sewers and stuff. Like it was,
I feel like that's maybe part of the reason, you know, Shredder came back in the second one. You know, maybe those same parents were.
yeah,
like,
that too. That's super dark at the end where Casey's just like, oops, he like pulls out, it just crushes Shredder. Like, yeah, that was kind of a shocking ending, maybe. But yeah, it's pretty dark. That you know, they just, for no good reason, he just feels like killing him, just squashing him in the garbage truck. So
at the same time, though, I wonder, because it's like the 80s were a funny time in terms of what was out there. I remember also, like, you know, Toxic Crusader, right? You know, that was also a series that was out, that was, if you were a kid, you probably didn't see those movies. And if you did see those movies,
yeah, there's no way. Like my parents never would have let me watch like any of those Troma films. And like, yeah, it was crazy, because like RoboCop was like insanely violent, and there were toys for RoboCop, and you know, Alien and Predator and like I just remember wanting those Terminator 2 figures so bad, and it was like I was never allowed to see that movie when I was a kid. You know, I had to wait till years later to, and like I was terrified of it. I saw Aliens at my friend's house because they had like a satellite dish, so he got all the movie channels. And I just remember like hiding like under a blanket or something during like Aliens, because I was like, oh god, I don't know how old I was. I was probably like 6 or 7 maybe. It was like so scary, but you could buy the toys and it looked cool. It's like, what are these cool creatures? And you know, yeah, it was weird. You get all these R-rated movies had toy lines back then.
And a lot of that stuff made its way into the Turtles line at some point too. Like you think of, you're saying RoboCop, that was REX-1, right?
Yeah,
you know, you're talking about Aliens, that's pizza monsters. You know, it's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's who's the other? They did a Freddy Krueger, Creepy Eddie.
Creepy Eddie.
Yeah, so yeah, there's all that pop culture stuff. Even like in the first movie, that was like, you know, they have all these Three Stooges references, and there's like moonlighting jokes in the first Turtles movie. It was just like, there's always this weird like pop culture stuff sort of like seeping into the movies and the cartoon. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's just so much fun.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like, it almost feels like stuff they couldn't get away with doing now, but it wanted to be able to do that, if that makes sense, you know, because it was irreverent, and they'd have those breaking the fourth wall. They'd have that where like Raph or Mikey or whoever would be talking to you and saying, didn't we do that last episode? Or, you know,
they're like, there's all this ridiculous exposition like Shredder and Krang are giving out, and Krang, you know, there's episodes where Krang's just like, I know you know this, I'm explaining it to them, you know. And there's you know, yeah, they do. Yeah, the writing's really funny on that show.
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. Going back to REX-1 for a second, because that's just one of my favorite characters, and to me seems like such a natural to be in this line. Do you have a sense how big you think this would be? Is there a way to describe it, I guess?
Yeah, it's I guess it would probably be, it's about yay big.
What? Oh my gosh.
So Chrome Dome is about here, I guess. He's a little taller, but the Turtles are gonna need, you know, their own robot for, you know, to fight. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Rex is gonna be about this big. You can see he's all articulated. The articulation on him is really good. He can do like the
he does
Richard Simmons, like you can put like tapes in him, and you can do the Richard Simmons like jazzercise, like Sweating to the Oldies.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, all the movements and stuff. He's got real good movement in his waist, and then he's got he sculpted in the little panels here, so his chest can open up, and he comes with VHS tapes, you know, and You can, his jaw will drop down. You stick the tongue in there when April or Irma or someone tells him to hold his tongue. And then, but yeah, Rex is going to be about this big, I guess.
Oh, that's a beauty.
Yeah, so he's real cool. Just got this sample from the factory the other day. He's great.
Heck yeah. Is there a timetable on this character when we think he's going to be?
I don't know. Yeah, he'll later this year. He's in production now. I have no information about if there's going to be a pre-order or online sales. He's part of the Target line because he's a cartoon figure. He's going to be an ultimate VHS box. He's not in a 2-pack. He's going to be in his own thing. So, price point's probably going to be similar to Chrome Dome and some of those other bigger figures. But yeah, he'll be out later this year. You can just check back with Instagram and Twitter and check all of NECA's social media for more accurate information. We should have him on display at Comic-Con in San Diego, so by then we should have more actual info. But lately we've had a lot of requests for Rex, or it'd be cool, you guys should make a Rex figure, and here to confirm we have made a REX-1 figure. So
and it's a gorgeous figure.
Yeah. Thank you. He's cool. Yeah, that's like a classic episode, just everyone remembers that New York's shiniest. Mm-hmm. And he's in another one too. He's in that. Do you remember the other one he's in? It's like the Mardi Gras or something, or like a masquerade. Something. It
was Renaissance Turtle. Was it Leonardo? Yeah.
And they go back to the lab or something, dust him off and have to turn him back on and everything. So I didn't remember he made a second appearance until we were sculpting the figure, and Brody Perkins did the sculpt, and he was watching the Renaissance Turtle episode, and I was like, what are you doing? He's in the Renaissance episode? I was like, REX-1 has his own, he's New York's shiniest. It was I only knew that episode.
Yeah, he's multiple appearances, and that's I think the one where Lex and Rexanne came into it also.
Yeah, that's right.
Lex was his. If he's RoboCop, that was his. What's that the giant robot's name?
Ed 209.
Yes, Ed 209. Yeah. Well, so that's very cool. What are 3 lines that are on your bucket list to get to work on someday, maybe?
There's a few. I love the old Hanna-Barbera stuff, the old the goofy cartoons like Yogi Bear and Flintstones and all that stuff is great. Quick Draw McGraw, I love those, but also the Alex Toth designs with Space Ghost and Mitor and just all the weird aliens and the robots and all that stuff from the 60s was fantastic. And yeah, Herculoids, I think who was it, Toynami, maybe a bunch of years ago, they made some stuff. Mm-hmm. I would love to work on something like that because it's I absolutely love the Alex Toth artwork. Cartoon stuff is a lot of fun to work on. And then there's other 80s toys that would be fun to bring back. I love Mask and Centurions and that Cops and Crooks show. There's just such weird fun characters. Any of those would be fun to work on. Real Ghostbusters would be an awesome project to work on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that would be tons of fun.
Were you ever a Filmation Ghostbusters fan?
Oh, that show made me really angry when I was a kid because it seemed like such an imposter. I've over the years, because I do have I can't help it, I do sort of have some contrarian tendencies and stuff, and I like just weird obscure crap. I've come to appreciate that show just for how bizarre it is, and the toys are weird. Everything about it was just weird and kind of wrong. So that Filmation Ghostbusters show, when I was a kid, when that show came on, I was just you want to throw stuff at the TV, and just storm out of the room or something. But I kind of like it now. And then finding out that it was another show, Bob Burns was Tracy the Gorilla, in the 70s, and Forrest Tucker and those guys were in. It was a live action show before it was a cartoon. And that show is hilarious. You watch those episodes on YouTube or whatever, it's 70s TV was very strange. It's fun to discover that stuff. And yeah, Bob Burns, how can you not like anything Bob Burns was in? He's the greatest.
Yeah. Well, and it was just kind of wacky. It almost, it's it had that element of 1966 Batman with it a little bit.
It's very campy. Yeah, it had all that weird slapstick stuff and just bad puns, and it was interesting.
All the makings of awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the thing. I think mine was flipped because I knew of that show. I grew up with that show. I got into the movies later on, the Ghostbuster movies, but I knew of that show. And so when the Filmation one came out, it was the opposite for me, where I was like,
oh, weird.
I see what you're doing there, real Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I definitely knew, like, I saw the Ghostbusters movie first. I saw that, like, that was back in the day when you had to rent the VCR, like the player. You had to rent that with the tape, the big clunky machine. I remember my mom walking across the street to the, like, convenience store, renting the tape and renting this, and trying to figure out how to plug all this stuff in. And yeah, that was before we even had like a tape player or anything. So yeah, I remember vividly watching that movie for the first time. And then I guess in another year or two, the cartoon had come out, and yeah, I was the real Ghostbusters, and that was my thing. And then when Filmation had I was like, it's like so weird. Why were there two Ghostbuster shows? It was, I don't know, it made no sense.
Right? Those characters though were so interesting. I think that's what I liked the most, is that, like, they were ghosts, but it didn't entirely note that they were ghosts. You wouldn't know it just looking at them at any given moment, because they were full-bodied characters.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it wasn't like a sheet floating around or something, like. Yeah.
And I was with the Alex Toth, what we were talking about a moment ago, it just made me think too, TMNT did that also, where you had in the 2012, where it brought in those elements of the Alex Toth, like, art to it. With
TMNT, the 2012 shows is probably my favorite, like, version of all the Turtles over the years, because it is like they would just do, like, the one season where they're at the farmhouse, like there's all these horror episodes, and then they would go into outer space and have like outer space adventures, and they'd come back to the city and have some really badass, like, they kind of got into a little bit with like City at War storylines, and like they took a little bit of everything and just made it all kind of like, it's just a great story from like season 1 into season 4 where it ends. It's great. And then they did like the Tales of the TMNT stuff in the season 5, like little mini kind of, it was more like an anthology series then, where they just did a little self-contained things. The 2012 shows, it's fantastic. So that one too, it felt like the first time they were actually teenagers, like they were kind of juvenile, like the original cartoon felt, maybe just because I was so young, like they felt more like grown-ups or something. Like there's 1 or 2 episodes where they goof off, and then they realize like there's that one where they go see a movie, and then like Splinter gets hurt and he's like unconscious, and in the original series, and April's like, where the hell were you guys? Because they had turned off their turtle comms, and now like I think it's like the Medi laser went berserk and knocked out Splinter. But in the 2012 show, it's like every episode they were like, they really just felt like kids, and like the characters were just a lot more like, they weren't so one-dimensional, I guess. I like the 2012 show a lot.
Yeah, it did a really nice job. I've had conversations with others too, where it's like, they're like, what's your favorite iteration? Well, it's like, this really captures everything. It taps into, and there's even the 2-parter episode where it does a crossover with the animated series.
87 Turtles. Yeah, it's got everything. They did those monster episodes. Like they had that Big Trouble in Little China episode, that was kind of like a Ghostbuster one. They had James Hong in there and all. They did such a great job.
Taking a big pivot here, but accessory wise, with some of these figures that you've created, has there been any that you've planned that you were really hoping would come with a figure which ultimately had to get cut?
Yeah, that happens. I try to load up the figures with like cool accessories. I'm like, anytime I'm watching an episode for research, it's, there's always another device that Donatello's got, or Krang or Shredder has something. And it's like, I do want to make every single weird little MacGuffin piece of technology that's on the show. When the NECA Turtles, when it's all said and done, hopefully we'll have made all of that weird stuff. The Sarnathometer, Donnie's little portal device, all that, so we do try to load them up with, I was just learning how to use ZBrush. One of the very first things I had sculpted was the soda can bazooka for Leatherhead, but it was so big, like Leatherhead was already huge, and they're like Slash had a bunch of weapons and all this stuff, so we just couldn't afford to include like this giant bazooka, so that got cut. Every now and then, there's the prices come back kind of weird sometimes, so like we had to cut some hands from Scumbug and Anthrax, and like I really wanted Muckman to have like fists and the like cool like gripping these evil claws. Like I just wanted him to be like very expressive, like posing and everything. So all those hands really help when you're trying, because we had like Rat King's got like this pointing hand. You can do like cool villain kind of stuff. So every now and then like things will get cut, but I'm glad like in the Disguised Turtle pack, we loaded that setup with like there's a skateboard, there's a boombox, there's like Pigeon Pete, like there's just all kinds of good accessories in there. So every now and then we'll stuff that didn't make the cut, we'll put them together in a box set, or maybe, you know, there's even an accessory set coming out soon, maybe. So, yeah, we try to load them up. We try to do lots of cool stuff. Doesn't always make it, so we just put it on the back burner until we find a place for it. Like Kerma, you know, Kerma, I knew I wanted to do something with Kerma. I didn't know where Kerma was going to go because I knew he was going to be too expensive to include with Dirtbag and Ground Shock. And when Mondo, Gecko, and Muckman were originally going to be a 2-pack, it was too expensive to put together, so we had to split them up. And then Randy was like, Mondo seems a little light. It's just like, it's Mondo and the skateboard. And it's like, is there anything else we can add with them? And I was like, I have this Kerma figure. Like I had him, like Kerma was just sitting there sculpted and ready to go. And Randy's like, oh, great. Okay. Like send it to the factory. We'll have them like requote. So like every now and then I've got one or two things just like kind of waiting in the wings.
Waiting for that right
we kind of plan big and then just sort of adjust it as we need to.
And Kerma is one of those that I was, when I was a kid, I was like kind of waiting with bated breath. Like this figure has to be coming, right? Because it was, he made multiple appearances. He was like such a staple of that show. I'm so grateful as a collector and as like a, you know, just a nostalgic nerd here, just that this is the kind of stuff that, you know, the NECA is being so mindful of too. It's like, stuff
there are so many characters that I was exactly the same way. Like there's all these great characters you love on the show that just never got a toy for one reason or another. One of the things I loved about the original toy line was all the little buddies. You know, there's so many of those, like, you know, Joe Eyeball and Screw Loose and the little beaver guy with Monty Moose, and like Half Court had the flamingo guy, you know, so there's just all those little dudes. And I wanted, there's a bunch of characters from the show that kind of work as those little sidekick characters that we can put in with like our figures. So Kerma like kind of became one of those. We made the little baby pizza monsters. Those are kind of good little buddies. Shredder that got mutated into the Fly. Baby Shredder, like we've had a bunch so far. Baby Tribble and the Gerbix, or what with the little fluffball teddy bear guy that like you get him wet or something, like gets huge.
He was their Gremlins.
Yeah. He was like their Mogwai or something. So yeah, and that too goes back to just all the pop culture references they just throw in, like all the classic stuff. Yeah, so we always try to add things in, you know, wherever we can, like that, just so we're trying to make as many of these characters from the show as we can.
Is there any additional iterations of Turtles that you're really hoping to expand into at some point? Yeah,
this seems a little bit like a baited question. I do. You know, the IDW is super cool, right? Like IDW stuff is pretty awesome. I would love to work on that someday. I don't know, what else is there? The 2012 stuff would be really fun to do. And there's a lot of cool characters from that show that would make good figures, just like IDW. Those would probably be my top 2 iterations, I guess. Just because there's so much to do, and they're so, like, both versions are so different. Yeah, they would both be great to work on.
Do you have favorite characters from both of those that are like on the top of your mind, if you're like, or is this not something you can answer?
I could probably answer it. I mean, there are a lot of characters. Like Tiger Claw is super cool character. In the 2012 show, like Treg and Granitor were like these giant, you know, rock monsters. Like they would just be so cool to make like a big 18-inch version of them to go with like little 6 or 7-inch figures. Leatherhead from the 2012 show would be cool because he's also just like, he's a big giant monster. That Mutagen Man was like a cool looking design. Like that would be a cool figure. The Punk Frogs were crazy in that episode. those guys would all be so much fun to work on. IDW, like I read the comics for a while. I kind of keep up with them. I love that like hermit crab guy, that Herman, he's got the big dumpster with all the weapons on his back. Like that guy would be great. I love that version of Mondo Gecko. The Punk Frogs just made an appearance in an issue not too long ago. And there's so many different artist styles. Like there's a few people like drawing those books that like different looks. So there's a lot of cool stuff. Like Jenica would be a cool figure. I really like that. I don't know if it's out yet. I guess, have they just shown concept art or something for Venus de Milo where she's all like Frankenstein monster looking?
She was just introduced into the series. So I think she's had like 2 issues. I mean, there's the free comic book day issue, and then there was the actual issue where she's
so like that too, like you just look at that design and you're like, that would be a kick-ass figure, you know. So yeah, there's both the 2012 and the IDW stuff. There's tons there to do. With
this new exclusive, which I'm very excited about, by the way, the 4-pack of the Premutants.
Premonition of the Premutation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Love it. First of all, I love the selection there. I'm excited for those characters. I know there's quite a few others out there who've been wanting those versions of those characters for a long time. Is there other hidden stuff that we should be looking for on the box there too? I know.
You know there is, of course. We themed the box is like Technodrome themed, you know, because we had done sewers and like city streets and all that. You know, when we did the disguised turtles, it was like, oh, we could hide some stuff in these windows. That'll be great. But I wanted to do like a Technodrome thing, and I didn't want to do the portal room. I wanted to do like just there's like that. We kind of modeled it after some of the other rooms you see in the Technodrome. But then, so there's computer screens and all kinds of crap everywhere. So yeah, there's tons of stuff that we just hid. Some of it, you know, might be hinting at something in the future. Other stuff is just kind of there for fun. Like on the top of the box, like we put Krang Go Home from like that one episode where like it's like the alternate reality and like Zach is like spray painting the Technodrome or something. And then who else is on here? That photo from April's aunt when she was you know, so there's like fun stuff. We're not going to make April's aunt, but you know, it's just like, yeah, there's maybe we will, I don't know. So, but yeah, there's like tons of Easter eggs all around the box on like the inside panel, and you know, that's the fun stuff when you're sitting there trying to, you know, you just watch the episodes all day and you're like, oh, this could be something, and you like take a note and just, you know, you just keep stuff sitting around just waiting because there's some way something will come along. And yeah, there's lots of Easter eggs and fun stuff to look at.
Is there any hope to getting a Barney head at some point too?
Yeah, oh, for sure. That's, you know, now that we have a human Baxter, it's like basically just a repaint. Like, how are you not gonna? Yeah, some way, somehow. I don't know how yet, but yeah, we'll find a way to do a Barney.
Sweet.
Like in the cartoon, I'd love a couple figures I would love to make. It's real obscure, but like those Kojima brothers, like,
oh yeah,
like there's one episode where they get like, I think they're like robots or statues, and then they get like, there's like they're ghosts at some point because Shredder gets like a diary or their like ninja notebook and summons their spirits. But they're mentioned in like a few other episodes too. Like the Kojima brothers have, like, they get name checked a few times, I think, in the cartoon. And it's like anything that goes back into the ancient sort of history or the roots of the Foot Clan is always, those figures are always fun. Yeah, there's Blast from the Past, and then there's the Legend of Hamato Koji, and that was the one where Shredder goes into the past, and then the turtles follow him, and they meet Hamato Koji, was like Splinter's ancestor, and that guy used the teachings of Shibano-sama to create the Foot Clan, like in the footprint of this dragon from the Tsunami box. That's a cool episode, is that Legend of Koji.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, we're so familiar, I think, with like getting all those kind of off the wall variants from the Playmate stuff, you know, from the toys from that. But when it comes to the cartoon, so many of those have never been seen, you know, because it's like, we've never seen Sailor Turtles. We've never seen, you know what I'm saying? Like there's some really fun ones.
It's like, you know, every year there should be like a new set of disguised turtles where they're in their like puffy coats or they're in their sailor outfits. And then you can do that with like Bebop and Rocksteady too. Like you could have like their like Disneyland vacation outfits, and when they dress up like the old lady and like the baby and then like that train conductor Shredder, I think you had that in one of your videos. There's one where he's like selling hot dogs. You remember that
Yes,
one?
yeah, hot dog vendor Shredder. And there's one where he's wearing a rain poncho too.
Yeah, yeah, he looks like the Gorton's Fisherman Man.
Yep.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
Shredder. They always had
yeah.
Shredder like the most ridiculous costumes. It was great.
Well, yeah, and I love that on the show. Where it's like Shredder he's more like a scientist than like a ninja in a lot of episodes, you know. And he'd still like he'd have all his like Shredder armor, but then he would have like a paper mask. Like he looked like a surgeon. Like he'd have a lab coat or something. You know, he'd put on these weird outfits. You know, like when he's building that Krang robot body, and or he'd wear a cloak. He'd have like a brown cloak just over his blades and everything. You know?
There's one that was like the stuff that makes me like just gives me the biggest smile is like this is like thinking putting a hat on somebody is like giving them a disguise, and it's like he's still wearing his full-on mask and full-on, you know, it's like,
well, there's like the hot dog vendor, he had the little paper hat like on top of the helmet or something, you know. And then there's the one, maybe it's like Take Me to Your Leader, I don't know, it's the one where they freeze the city and Krang's android body has a scarf and like earmuffs, you know, and he's got like mittens, and it's like the funniest thing that the android body would have like earmuffs and a scarf. You know, Krang is in the belly, but is not wearing a hat or anything, but the android body is bundled up for the snow, you know.
Oh yeah, it's great. Well, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen plenty of this too, but like some of the like the packaging artwork on stuff, you know, for various, not necessarily the toys, but like for the games or the cards or some, you know, some of those other things. It's surprising how much they don't have Shredder with pants, because it was like this color. It was like they were.
Oh, really?
Weren't so familiar. Yeah, but it's like,
okay,
it's flesh tone.
Yeah.
And it's like just looks like he's pantsless.
He's just got his legs out. Oh, I don't know. I can't recall that. That's interesting.
Because I think it was like, probably I would imagine it was the early days when not as many people were so familiar with the characters, where it's like it just looks like his legs. So they didn't, you know.
It's like, it's like that's all the He-Man and all the barbarian like influence stuff, I guess, before, right? Like every other toy line had some guy running around in just underwear. So I'm sure they just thought that's what this was too.
That's probably pretty accurate. I'm guessing you're right. You're probably dead on that. Are there any other exclusives from Turtles facing world that'll be showing up at Comic-Con perhaps as exclusives?
This is the first show I think we're doing since Toy Fair of 2020. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff people haven't seen. There's things we've been working on. Maybe there's just been photos or a little teaser here and there. There's nothing else that's really going to be like exclusive to San Diego, but there'll be a lot of new stuff to show off and announce for, you know, the rest of this year and kind of going into early 2023.
Is there any iteration of the lines that you have out there now that could be a exclusive as well? So like the Universal Monsters is an example.
You don't want to get too predictable or stuff gets too stale. And like there's fans of all these iterations. Like so you want to make sure you're kind of like servicing everybody, right? We'll do a couple like movie exclusives. We'll do a couple cartoon ones. We'll do a couple video game ones, Archie stuff. And, you know, Monster, like Last Ronin, just to mix it up. Any of the Turtles that we're making under like any of those banners, like if it's worth pursuing, then any of those things could be, you know, like a box set or an exclusive.
From the Archie line, two questions on this. One is, will this be along the lines of, in terms of figures that we might get from this line, more similar to the Universal Monsters, where that's maybe 8 to 10 per year versus what's coming out from the 2-packs, which is slightly more, it seems like?
It's not going to be 8 to 10. They're kind of grouped in with the Mirage things. It's all like the comic book stuff. So like I guess the plan is to kind of shoot for like 4 to 6 figures, and then they're kind of mixed up in with like, you know, 4 to 6 Mirage figures or something. You know, it's tricky because if you get into Turtles, that's automatically there's 4 figures right there. Are the Turtles going to be a 4-pack, or are those going to be individual, just like the other characters? So it's like a weird like kind of balancing. But yeah, there's going to be 4 to 6, I guess, Archie guys in a year. Probably not more than that, unless it's like a turtle set and there's, you know, you got 4 right there already, and then, you know, maybe there's 3 or 4 more with like some Mutanimals or someone else.
So just to be clear, we're talking the wrestling Turtles. Yeah.
I mean, those again, like, yeah, those look like they would make really cool action figures. And for sure, I mean, people have asked about those. There's definitely a good interest there for doing some stump wrestling turtles. So it's not impossible, yeah, that we might make those. I don't know, maybe not. We got to get the first 4 out this year. So, we got Slash and Ray Fillet, and then Dreadmon and Jaguar, and those guys do well. We'll definitely, just keep doing more Archie stuff, Turtles and otherwise.
Will we see some of the packaging on that then at Comic-Con, or would that be beforehand, do you think?
Yeah, no, probably the Slash packaging, that stuff's all done. They're in production now. It's possible we might have package samples ready in time for Comic-Con. The boxes, they're very similar to the Mirage style. It's kind of like that trapezoid shape, and then like it's a little more colorful, like the Archie comics were, and then Ken's artwork is all over it. So they're very similar to the Mirage thing that we set up. They're really cool looking.
Well, that's it for part 1 of our exclusive interview series. But stay tuned, because part 2 is coming right around the corner. We realize you could have been anywhere and you chose to nerd out with us, and we appreciate that. And while you're here, make sure to check out some of our other really cool videos we think that you'll appreciate quite a bit. And if you haven't already, make sure to sub, like, and share with any other folks you think will appreciate the kind of videos we're putting out. So, until next week, Turtle Speaky,
keep it geeky.